Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This video will be a fair bit different from my previous uploads, as you can already tell by me speaking English, and that's because I want to aim this video at an international audience. Because of that, and for any new viewers watching, let's have a quick backstory to how this video came about and what my goal with it is. So, several years ago, I started to actively participate in discussions in the international public transport space on different social media platforms. And alongside, I started watching videos here on YouTube by creators like RM Transit and later Dron the Go, who both do amazing work introducing people to all manner of transport systems around the world. But I feel like one type of public transportation has been quite neglected in this discussion. While metros, suburban rail, regional rail and high-speed rail are popular topics for system explainer videos, the very important sector of regional bus systems has gone largely unnoticed or underrepresented. Too many people, especially from countries where public transport is less well used, still believe that only big cities of many hundreds of thousands of people can have substantial transit networks. And with this video, I want to show a clear example that this isn't true, and that less densely and less evenly populated places can also have good local public transport. To do this, I'm going to show you a regional bus system today that I'm personally very familiar with and that I use semi-frequently. With me being German, of course it will be a German network, and more precisely, we'll be going to the Western German state of North Rhine-Westphalia, home to such cities as Cologne, Düsseldorf, or Bonn, the former West German capital. Now, a bit of geographical information: below state level, Germany is divided into districts and independent cities, and one such district will be our main setting. This will be the so-called Rhein-Sieg district, named after its two principal rivers that flow through it, the Rhine and the Sieg. And this is located in the south of North Rhine-Westphalia and almost wholly surrounds the city of Bonn. It also borders on Cologne, Germany's fourth largest city to the north. And relevant for us will be the part of the district east of the River Rhine, where we find the regional bus network of the Rhein-Sieg Transportation Company, or RSVG for short. In addition to serving the East Bank Rhein-Sieg district, RSVG buses also run into the city of Bonn, all the way to its main railway station on the western side of the river, but more on that later. So let's take a closer look at this service area first to get familiar with the region our network operates in. The service area of the RSVG is roughly 870 square kilometers in size. That's similar to the size of Berlin. The portion of the Rhein-Sieg district served by our network has a population of about 446,000 people. The areas of Bonn served add another 110,000 inhabitants to our service area. Additionally, several hundred thousand more people live in close proximity, either in Bonn or in southeastern Cologne. The Rhein-Sieg district is indeed largely part of the Cologne-Bonn metropolitan area and commuter belt, and that means it is at least in part still quite urban. But don't worry, I haven't made this video as a joke. The RSVG network is not just an urban bus network in disguise, at least not entirely. The area it operates in is very diverse in terms of density and urbanization. Let's look at the area closer to the city of Bonn and the River Rhine first. As the satellite view shows, it is heavily populated. The towns of Siegburg, which is the administrative center of the Rhein-Sieg district, St. Augustin, Troisdorf and Hennef are almost all merged together if it wasn't for small sections of preserved nature. This is where most of the population of our service area lives and where we'll find some genuinely urban RSVG bus routes. Keep in mind though that all these towns are relatively small, with Siegburg, for example, having just 42,000 inhabitants. This means that while density is somewhat higher here, we're not looking at big city conditions really. Houses are mostly no taller than 3 stories, and there are many single-family homes and row houses. Heading to the east or northeast of the district, we'll find a totally different scenario. Here we'll see many small, scattered villages and only a handful of small towns of a few thousand people to tie the region together. Settlements are now broken up by fields, hills, or woodland, and you can see just how diverse the RSVG's service area is. Now that we've familiarized ourselves with the area our bus system runs in, let's finally get to the network itself. Oh my god. Alright, that was maybe a bit too quick. To make sense of the RSVG network, let's first take a look at the types of lines we can find on it. Now, RSVG bus routes fall into 4 categories. The first one is the fast bus category. These lines are called Schnellbus in German and are abbreviated as SB, and these serve to quickly connect the more densely populated areas to smaller outlying towns. The speed is often not gained by skipping stops, but instead by following direct road alignments and not deviating into villages. Where they do overlap with regular bus routes, some stops are skipped though. Fast buses have the prefix SB and are numbered in the 50 range, so for example SB 53. The next category is regular bus. These lines are numbered between 501 and 579, and they are the backbone of the RSVG system and comprise all regular bus lines that follow a fixed timetable. This means both the more urban services and the more rural services fall under the same category, and we'll see later that frequencies can vary wildly between lines here. Next, there is on-demand service, and on-demand routes are numbered in the 580s range, and they may be provided by something as simple as a taxi cab that shows up about 30 minutes or so after you make a call for it. Some regular routes are switched to on-demand service late in the evening or on weekends and or just on Sundays as well. And then finally there are school buses. These are numbered in the 590s range and are only available to school children. They run only during the morning and afternoon school commute hours, but many schools are also accessible by regular bus routes, so kids often don't solely rely on these services. Additionally, some small communities in the Rhein-Sieg district run local volunteer transport services called Bürgerbus, which literally translates as citizens' bus, so provided by citizens for the benefit of other citizens. And these Bürgerbus lines provide an additional layer of service within their respective communities on top of the RSVG routes. They can operate either on fixed routes or on demand as well. But because these Bürgerbus lines are not officially part of the RSVG system, I'm not going to go into any further detail on them. Let's head back to the network map then and take a look at some of the key features of the system before looking at several lines up close. What becomes immediately apparent when checking out the network is how good the coverage is. Basically all parts of the eastern Rhein-Sieg district are served by the RSVG buses, and many lines form direct connections between town pairs that allow for travel without changing vehicles. A lot of lines also cross each other, allowing passengers to change services without always having to travel into the largest towns. These larger towns still almost always form major transfer points though, and act as hubs of the network. Towards the western edge of the map, we see the services heading to Bonn city centre and its main railway station. These form an important connection for commuters. Additionally, in the southwest of the map, we see several lines terminating at the River Rhine. These bus lines feed into the Bonn light rail system here that runs along the river. Connecting with other modes of transport is something the RSVG system does well. RSVG buses serve a plethora of local railway stations and interchange with both Bonn's and Cologne's urban transit networks. The highest order interchange of all, although somewhat debatably, has to be at Siegburg railway station, where buses meet the Bonn light rail, Cologne S-Bahn trains, regional express trains, and even high-speed rail. The Cologne-Frankfurt HSR runs right through Siegburg, and a good number of trains on it make a stop here. If you're interested in the rail operations at Siegburg, I've got a video linked for you in the description of this one. Let's have a look then now at some individual bus lines of the RSVG network so that you can get a proper close-up look at the operations. To start off, we'll have a look at line SB56, so a fast bus, one of the premier RSVG services, so to speak. SB56 connects the district seat of Siegburg with the small town of Much in the northeast of the district that you saw on the rural map that I showed earlier. It generally runs half-hourly Mondays to Saturdays and hourly on Sundays, with service starting in the early morning and lasting all the way into the night. Starting at the somewhat drab but definitely weatherproof Siegburg railway station bus terminal, line SB56 heads immediately east through some of the denser parts of town, before merging with several other lines northeast of the center of Siegburg. Soon, buses run through thick greenery and turn onto Federal Route B56, which will carry them all the way to their destination of Much. Whether the line number was chosen due to this alignment, I am unfortunately not quite sure. Travel is pretty swift along the B56 through more lush forests and over the crests of rolling hills. The only major calling point en route to Much is the town of Seelscheid, which forms part of the combined Neunkirchen-Seelscheid municipality. Past Seelscheid, the scenery is more of the same, but the road gets windier. In Much, the SB56 terminates right on the main street of this picturesque little town, allowing easy interchange to the other bus lines that come here. We'll return to Much later with a couple of rural lines, but now it's time to look at some of the operations in the more urbanized part of the RSVG system. Line 510 is a real standout service in my eyes, and you'll quickly see why. Officially, the 510 runs from Siegburg all the way to Hennef, but most services actually run just within Siegburg. During weekday peak periods, Line 510 can run as frequently as every 10 minutes on its main section, with a 20-minute frequency being the norm Mondays to Saturdays, and buses running half-hourly on Sundays. Remember, this peak hour 10-minute frequency is for a bus line running in a town of just 42,000 people, and the 510 gets supplemented on a good part of its route by other lines still. The reason for this high frequency is the fact that line 510 is the only bus route serving the well-populated Siegburg neighborhood of Kaldauen, which acts as a significant trip generator. On their way to the 510's terminus at Siegburg railway station, buses squeeze through the windy streets of the city center and serve schools and a convention center. If a 10-minute frequency is only needed for a portion of a route, then it makes sense to overlap two lines with 20-minute frequencies to achieve that goal. That's exactly what lines 501 and 503 do on the popular hop between Siegburg and neighboring Troisdorf. Each line has a regular frequency of every 20 minutes Mondays to Saturdays, with half-hourly service on Sundays. On the shared section, these two are overlaid to complement each other's schedules exactly to form a denser service pattern. The route between Troisdorf and Siegburg is almost fully built up with fairly dense housing. Connecting the railway stations of both towns, lines 501 and 503 act as feeder services and local distributors for both Siegburg's and Troisdorf's rail hubs. Further out, lower density areas are served where the combined frequency is no longer required or overlaps with other services occur. Next, let's have a look at a route running into the city of Bonn. I've chosen a unique example for this, as line 550 is the only RSVG bus route serving Bonn city centre that doesn't use the city centre bridge. Line 550 runs the same frequency as lines 501 and 503 do, meaning generally every 20 minutes Mondays to Saturdays and half-hourly on Sundays. Starting at Bonn railway station, the line serves the important Friedensplatz bus interchange first and then heads north. In the north of Bonn, it makes contact with the local tram network again. Running parallel to tram line 61, bus line 550 serves some of the same stops. It then branches off onto the so-called North Bridge, actually a motorway bridge, to cross the River Rhine and enter the Rhein-Sieg district. Once there, the 550 runs along a busy main road connecting Bonn and Cologne along the eastern bank of the River Rhine. A bus lane was installed here in the inbound direction to help the several RSVG bus routes that run here bypass traffic. After a short while, line 550 turns off the main road and meets with line 501. From then on, the 550 makes its way up through the riverside communities until it reaches the far southeastern outskirts of Cologne. Finally, for our last two routes, let's head into the more rural parts of the RSVG service area again. First up is line 578, connecting Much with Hennef. With the 578 being a more rural operation, its frequency is quite a bit worse than that of previous lines. The base frequency is hourly, 7 days a week, with several periods of densified service Mondays through Fridays. This means half-hourly frequency. Still, even the 578 runs late into the night every single day. I picked up the 578 at the Antoniusplatz interchange in Neuenkirchen, roughly halfway along the route. Heading south from there towards Hennef, the 578 runs along Neuenkirchen's main street and sticks to the main road to Hennef for much of its trip. We pass through villages with typical Rhineland names like Wolperath or Heisterschoss and zoom through the fields. A small deviation of the main road is made in Happerschoss, the final village before reaching Hennef, where the bus runs right by the quaint church square. Leaving the village of Happerschoss, things get dramatic quickly. Line 578 has to descend into the valley of the River Sieg to reach Hennef, and it does so by negotiating almost alpine-like hairpin turns. Crossing the River Sieg and entering the town of Hennef, the 578 terminates at Hennef's bus station, which is conveniently located right beside the railway station, with seamless transfers right from the bus to the train. To some extent, Hennef forms the eastern boundary of the Cologne-Bonn urban commuter belt. And lastly, we'll have a look at a really humble service, line 576. Connecting Neuenkirchen with the village of Marienfeld at the very edge of the RSVG service area, line 576 is a so-called Hüpfer or hopper service, meaning a line that uses minibuses and that was introduced to provide public transport to previously underserved areas. Its frequency is simple, hourly almost all week, with just a few extra services on weekday mornings benefiting school children. Service hours are once again extensive though, especially on Friday and Saturday nights or before public holidays. The minibuses employed on line 576 carry special branding that is supposed to entice potential riders to use the service. I personally quite like the design used, and I find these Mercedes Sprinters pretty fitting for their routes. The 576 serves mostly rural and low-density areas on quiet back roads and streets. And while the small size of the buses is motivated primarily by low expected ridership, on line 576 it might as well be a technical requirement, as on its southernmost leg between Seelscheid and Neuenkirchen, the buses have to negotiate some pretty treacherous corners and tight roads up and down densely forested hillsides. A regular bus could easily get stuck here. As you can see, different bus lines can have very different frequencies from each other, and there isn't always a good way to guess these frequencies. Some services I used surprised me with better frequency than expected, while others let me down. Especially bad is that a few direct routes do not feature Sunday service, forcing you to switch over to other routes to reach the same destination, which involves a transfer. Still, the overall service offering, I think, is very solid. I already showed quite a few buses running around and briefly mentioned a few types in the last segment, but let's have a better look at the bus fleet of the RSVG. The RSVG bus fleet is extremely diverse, both in terms of vehicle types and liveries. This is because the RSVG, in addition to running their own buses, makes use of several subcontractors to operate services for them. These subcontractors often run in their own liveries, making the RSVG bus hubs a hodgepodge of colorful buses. Not to worry though, these subcontractors don't charge their own fares or anything, they merely operate on behalf of the RSVG, and all fares are integrated in the greater Cologne-Bonn region anyway, as with all of Germany. Still, for people unfamiliar with this arrangement, it can be a little disorienting to see so many differently colored buses running the same services. The key is to always look for the route number and destination. Those are really all that matters. Back to buses though. Fast bus lines usually operate the nicest and most modern equipment, though they don't have a monopoly on it. In the case of the SP56 which we rode, MAN Line city buses of the second generation are used, of the 18-meter articulated variant. These buses have 4 doors allowing for quick alighting, but all boarding on RSVG buses is by the first door only. Inside, all buses on the RSVG network are pretty similar. They feature low floors, modern information screens, clearly audible announcements, and spaces for prams or wheelchairs. Seats are typically of a low-back design but nicely padded and sufficient for the types of journeys you'll be taking here. Apart from the MAN buses, you can also find VDL Citeas operating fast bus services, a less glamorous vehicle perhaps. Regular RSVG bus routes and school bus runs use a myriad of bus types, a real spotter's dream. You'll find the aforementioned second-gen Lion cities, their first-gen predecessors, the venerable Mercedes Citaro of both generations, Solaris Urbinos, Iveco Crossways, Volvos, Setras, and even sometimes Scanias. Newest in the fleet are 6 BYD electrics, so regional networks are now also experiencing electrification. Finally, of course, there are the hoppers again, the charming sprinter-based minibuses with their special liveries. These too have all the amenities the regular-sized buses provide, so are no big step down in comfort. All these lines and buses are pretty neat, but what does the infrastructure side of the network look like? You've already seen glimpses of the larger bus stations of Siegburg, Troisdorf and Hennef, and these all provide good weather protection to passengers and are equipped with live departure boards to keep travelers informed. Regular bus stops always feature at least a sign that clearly states the stop's name and which routes serve it, alongside a paper timetable for each route and a litter bin. Not all stops have shelters though, unfortunately, so you might get wet depending on where you wait. Electronic departure boards are also being deployed at an increasing number of regular stops too. In terms of bus lanes, there is pretty little to show for in the Rhein-Sieg district. Many roads are simply too narrow for separate bus lanes, featuring just one lane for all vehicle traffic per direction. Still, like I showed you with bus line 550, bus lanes have been implemented where possible on an expressway heading north out of Bonn, which is prone to congestion. Additionally, buses can utilize an otherwise pedestrian-only area in front of Siegburg railway station to access the interchange there, but there is little other dedicated bus infrastructure to show. So then, what does all this leave us with? The RSVG bus network is not a perfect one. There are still some service improvements that could be made, and perhaps the brand image should be consolidated better between RSVG and subcontractor vehicles to create more clarity for riders. But these are comparatively small gripes, because what the RSVG system as a whole shows us is that a comprehensive, diverse and therefore challenging bus network can be successfully managed and operated by one agency, and that even semi-rural places can still receive solid public transport that can offer people an alternative to driving at basically any time. The RSVG bus network gets a lot right in my eyes, and that is why I chose to showcase it today, to give you not just an example of what regional buses can look like, but perhaps also a bit of inspiration for your own home region if it isn't doing so well on transit right now. But what do you think of the RSVG network, and how does it compare to regional buses where you live? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you to the VRS Transport Association for letting me use their official RSVG network map in this video. Of course, they didn't commission me to make this video. All of the opinions I share today are my own. But if you made it all this way, thank you so much for watching. A like, comment, or a share would be very much appreciated, and I hope you stick around for future videos. Take care.